Hi, the Unruly Gardener here. I am going to read the preface of The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman in this video. Book is by John Perkins. And I will put in the time where the actual reading starts. But before we do that, I want to also show you this book. This is what actually prompted me to do this video. It's The Secret History of the American Empire, also by John Perkins. This book, I think, is from 2012, and this one is newer, it's from 2015. The Truth About Economic Hitmen, Jackals, and How to Change the World. Well, let me it's an impact that this book has had on me, and I haven't even finished it. Let me just go back a little bit to how I got back to John Perkins. Now, I've just recently, since maybe last year, started reading again after a hiatus for almost 15 years or 16 years. And in 2002, I had gone part-time in my medical profession. I'd finished the healing school a couple years before. I finished the Hakomi training. We'd done the Wake and Down retreats, and certain spiritual teachers I'd been reading about or visited or worked with or whatnot. And it was I knew I wasn't done. I just didn't know where I was going to go. There was like the matrix works and, a couple other things. And one of the things that came up was this guy, John Perkins. And he was leading excursions into the jungles of the Amazon and working with shamans there, and I'm like, it could be that this is it. So, I did an invocation the summer of 2002, and things came up, and I ended up going to California, the Institute of the Development, to IDHSB, Institute for the Development of the Harmonious Human Being. I ended up working there in the community, and I'm still there. But when I was listening to a YouTube video by Lynn Twist, who's been working with the Amazon, some Amazon tribes to safeguard the origins of the river, the Amazon River, and how she came about to do that. At some point, when she was telling her visions, she mentioned, okay, and then John Perkins said, that's not a vision, they're calling you. And there was that name again the other day, John Perkins. So I looked him up, thinking like then that he was some kind of like a shaman or healer or whatever, And he'd written some books. And it wasn't about them, about shamanic medicines or anything. He had written this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And I would say, economic hitman? What the hell is that? I mean, where have I lived all these years? This book is from 2005. So then I looked up some second, New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, 2015. And then that's this book, New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Oh no. That's this book, New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. And this is what I'm going to read from. And like I said, I'll show you where that starts. Started with this first, The Secret History of the American Empire. And I was about this much into the book. And I just had to pause, and I was very still. and stunned. I was just stunned silence with just 2 tears rolling down my face, because the magnitude of what I was seeing. And I see, when I read a book, it's like a movie for me. I see stuff that gets described. It's like when you hear about how animals are abused in industrial agriculture, or what happens to the baby calves and the cows, and in the slaughterhouses, and you hear about it, but there's a level of willful ignorance where you don't actually expose yourself to the actual what's happening. You don't feel it, you don't see it, because when you do and it's present with you, you change what you do. And it's kind of like that with this book. You hear about, in Facebook comments and news headlines, there's all these rumors that how Americans are doing this and that and blah 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 in the Middle East and in Asia and in Latin America, and how and all this, and then you read this book, which for me is like a movie, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember vaguely as a girl growing up, there was this Che Guevara guy, and there was all this stuff about the communistic things in South America, and how one after the other either got killed or toppled and all that. And then you read how it was actually done, and you find out about EAHMs, economic hitmen. And if they didn't succeed with the means they used, then the jackals would come in. The CIA supported jackals. In the process of awakening of your individual self, you face certain realities about what happened, about yourself, and you also begin to have glimpses of the ground of being, the infinite love, that in which we are. And there's one thing that EJ has said, enlightenment is just the very first step in a very long journey, something like that. Later on come other skills, and I know that I have recognized myself as I have recognized certain limitations that I have, whether it be in relational abilities, capacities to do things, technical things, ability to handle lots of money or do my paperwork. It doesn't matter. My nervous system is still, whether I like it or not, of a certain quality and capacity. So this video may be what I can do to encourage you to educate yourself, to wake up to the truth of what America and the corporations have done, and in the last 10 years have accelerated in doing, even in the countries that are so-called developed. If you are true about awakening and getting in touch with your essential self and recognizing that and shedding your cultural conditioning, your individual conditioning, and being more and more open to flow, there, at least for me, and it may be different for others, how can you close your eyes to the suffering that practices of the rich countries have caused and are still causing to countries with big resources that they want? How can you go shopping and not choose fair trade? How can you go shopping and not be aware of the plight of the people that actually produced your clothes? I don't want to hear about awakening when you're not aware of that. Now, I understand everybody has to wear something. And, thrift stores are always an option. But that's beside the point. It's stunned silence at what has been done and is still being done to those countries and those people, the political leaders there that want to help their country, that want to be benefiting the people of the country where the resources are being exploited. So, yeah, you need to read these books. And I'm going to read the preface of one of them. So, I'll see. So this will be the preface of The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, published in 2015. And I will point the camera on this. Apparently his books are have been or are being translated in many languages, so you will be able to find that in your language. Okay, here it is. The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, published 2015. Preface. Economic hitmen, EHMs, are highly paid professionals who cheat countries around the globe out of trillions of dollars. They funnel money from the World Bank, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and other foreign aid organizations into the coffers of huge corporations and the pockets of a few wealthy families who control the planet's natural resources. Their tools include fraudulent financial reports, rigged elections, payoffs, extortion, sex, and murder. They play a game as old as empire, but one that has taken on new and terrifying dimensions during this time of globalization. I should know. I was an EHM. I wrote that in 1982 at the beginning of a book with the working title Conscience of an Economic Hitman. The book was dedicated to the heads of state of two countries, men who had been my clients, whom I respected and thought of as kindred spirits, Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama. Both had just died in fiery crashes. Their deaths were not accidental. They were assassinated because they opposed that fraternity of corporate government and banking heads whose goal is global empire. We EHMs failed to bring Roldos and Torrijos around, and the other type of hitmen, the CIA-sanctioned jackals who were already right behind us, stepped in. I was persuaded to stop writing that book. I started it 4 more times during the next 20 years. On each occasion, my decision to begin again was influenced by current world events: the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989, the First Gulf War, Somalia, the rise of Obama's bin Laden. However, threats or bribes always convinced me to stop. In 2003, the president of a major publishing house that is owned by a powerful international corporation read a draft of what had now become Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He described it as a riveting story that needs to be told. Then he smiled sadly, shook his head, and told me that since the executives at World Headquarters might object, he could not afford to risk publishing it. He advised me to fictionalize it. We could market you in the mold of a novelist like John le Carré or Graham Greene. But this is not a fiction. It is the true story of my life. It is the story of the creation of a system that has failed us. A more courageous publisher, one not owned by an international corporation, agreed to help me tell it. What finally convinced me to ignore the threats and bribes? The short answer is that my only child, Jessica, graduated from college and went out into the world on her own. When I told her that I was considering publishing this book and shared my fears with her, she said, "Don't worry, Dad. If they get you, I'll take over where you left off. We need to do this for the grandchildren I hope to give you someday." That is the short answer. The longer version relates to my dedication to the country where I was raised, to my love of the ideals expressed by our founding fathers, to my deep commitment to the American Republic that today promises life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all people everywhere, and to my determination after 9/11 not to sit idle by any longer while EHMs turn that republic into a global empire. That is the skeleton version of the long answer. The flesh and blood I added in the chapters that follow. Why was I not killed for telling this story? As I will explain in more detail in the pages of The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the book itself became my insurance policy. This is a true story. I lived every minute of it. The sights, the people, the conversations, and the feelings I describe were all a part of my life. This is my personal story, and yet it happened within the larger context of world events that has shaped our history, have brought us to where we are today, and formed the foundation of our children's futures. I have made every effort to present these experiences, people, and conversations accurately. Whenever I discuss historical events or recreate conversations with other people, I do so with the help of several tools: published documents, personal records and notes, recollections, my own and those of others who participated, the 5 manuscripts I began previously, and historical accounts of other authors, most notably recent published ones that disclose information that formerly was classified or otherwise unavailable. References are provided in the endnotes to allow interested readers to pursue these subjects in more depth. In some cases, I combine several dialogues I had with a person into one conversation to facilitate the flow of the narrative. My publisher asked whether we actually refer to ourselves as economic hitmen. I assured him that we did, although usually only by the initials. In fact, on the day in 1971 when I began working with my teacher Claudine, she informed me, "My assignment is to mold you into an economic hitman. No one can know about your involvement. not even your wife. Then she turned serious. Once you're in for life. Claudine pulled no punches when describing what I would be called upon to do. My job, she says, was to encourage world leaders to become part of a vast network that promotes U.S. commercial interests. In the end, those leaders become ensnared in a web of debt that ensures their loyalty. We can draw on them whenever we desire to satisfy our political, economic, or military needs. In turn, they bolster their political positions by bringing industrial parks, power plants, and airports to their people. The owners of U.S. engineering construction companies become fabulously wealthy. If we faltered, a more malicious form of hitman, the jackal, would step to the plate, and if the jackals failed, then the job fell to the military. Now, 12 years after Confessions of an Economic Hitman was first published, that original publisher and I know that it is time for a new edition. Readers of the 2004 book sent thousands of emails asking how its publication impacted my life, what I am doing to redeem myself and change the EHM system, and what actions they can take to turn things around. This new book, is my answer to those questions. It is also time for a new edition because the world has changed radically. The EHM system, based primarily on debt and fear, is even more treacherous now than it was in 2004. The EHMs have radically expanded their ranks and adopted new disguises and tools. And we in the United States have been hit badly. The entire world has been hit. We know that we teeter on the edge of disaster, economic, political, social, and environmental disaster. We must change. This story must be told. We live in a time of terrible crisis and tremendous opportunity. The story of this particular economic hitman is the story of how we got to where we are and why we currently face crises that often seem insurmountable. This book is a confession of a man who, back when I was an EHM, was part of a relatively small group. People who play similar roles are much more abundant now. They have euphemistic titles. They walk the corridors of Fortune 500 companies like Exxon, Walmart, General Motors, and Monsanto. They use the EHM system to promote their private interests. In a very real sense, the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman is the story of this new EHM breed. It is your story too, the story of your world and mine. We are all complicit. We must take responsibility for our world. The EHMs succeed because we collaborate with them. They seduce, cajole, and threaten us, but they win only when we look the other way or simply give in to their tactics. By the time you read these words, events will have happened that I cannot imagine as I write them. Please see this book as offering a new perspective for understanding those events and future ones. Admitting to a problem is the first step toward finding a solution. Confessing a sin is the beginning of redemption. Let this book, then, be the start of our salvation. Let it inspire us to new levels of dedication and drive us to realize our dream of balanced and honorable society. John Perkins, October 2015. I'm going to go a little further on. Introduction, the new Confessions. I'm haunted every day by what I did as an economic hitman, EHM. I'm haunted by the lies I told back then about the World Bank. I'm haunted by the ways in which that bank, its sister organization, and I empowered U.S. corporations to spread their cancerous tentacles across the planet. I'm haunted by the payoffs to the leaders of poor countries, the blackmail and the threat that if they resisted, if they refused to accept the loans that would enslave their countries in debt, the CIA jackals would overthrow or assassinate them. I wake up sometimes to the horrifying images of heads of state, friends of mine, who died violent deaths because they refused to betray their people. Like Shakespeare's Macbeth, I try to scrub the blood from my hands, but the blood is merely a symptom. The treacherous cancer beneath the surface, which was revealed in the original Confessions of an Economic Hitman, has metastasized. It has spread from the economically developing countries to the United States and the rest of the world. It attacks the very foundations of democracy and the planet's life support system. All the EHM and Jackal tools, false economics, false promises, threats, bribes, extortion, debt, deception, coups, assassination, unbridled military power are used around the world today even more than during the era I exposed more than a decade ago. Although this cancer has spread widely and deeply, most people still aren't aware of it. Yet all of us are impacted by the collapse it has caused. It has become the dominant system of economics, government, and society today. Fear and debt drive this system. There are things you can do, and he goes into that later in the book. Okay, so I'm very aware that I am very limited in what I can do, but I currently see no point in discussing any of the world events with anyone who has not been willing to at least educate themselves from somebody who has been there and done that and internally watched what was going on and what is going on. And for example, as an example, in Bolivia, just the other day, read those books and draw from it the strength, not collapse, not agony, not pain, not screaming, not irrational anger, but the strength for integrity, the strength to choose wisely what you buy, the willingness to be engaged where you live. There is such a thing as sacred activism. Anyway, I was called to do this. I did it. And, you do what you do. Adios, and thanks for watching.